Cool. So I get to just start, don't I? Isn't that cool? Hello. How's it going, everybody? All right. So fun. All right, my friends. Thanks for letting me do this. I'm sorry I couldn't be here in person. Right now, 9 a.m. I just dropped my kids off at school, and now I get to spend some time with y'all. We're trying a couple of different things here. Rather than just doing a Teams call and having me share my screen, I'm going to try to be a little bit more creative with my presentation. I'm going to use OBS. So I'm going to pop myself down here. And what's cool about this is that I can do stuff like this. And I can come over here, or I can go over here. So I'll try to use that throughout the talk here. So I put together this talk for you all, but then but looking at everyone else's talks and looking at the wonderful fonts and stuff, I realized that this font was really unprofessional and probably a mistake. I think MS Comic Sans may have been a poor choice on my part. So I decided to match the aesthetic of the conference a little bit better, so I took my fonts to the next level. But then I was told that a white background with black text is unprofessional. So I got some stock photography to make it a little more classy, make it look like a developer's desk. I think we can all agree that our desks look exactly like this, and this is a real typical developer desk, right? Or is this a typical developer desk, right? These are the questions that we should ask ourselves. Someone told me that this picture was a real developer's desk. I pushed back on that for a second because I don't like words like that. I don't like it when people say that's what a real developer's desk looks like, because there's no reason that it couldn't look like this, because maybe you are a cool developer with money and you know how to hide the cords on your table. A real developer's desk looks like whomever's desk it is. It could be this, it could be this, it could be whatever. We want everybody to feel welcome. So it's really important to think about that in the context of attitude and style. So when we think about new early in career people, welcoming people into our community, into our user groups, our conferences, our product communities, how we approach those people and our new friends really speaks to the attitude and the style that we as an organization have decided to do. And as you get on the internet and become a programmer or become a technical marketer or become a person in tech, you can bump into these guys a lot. And they make you feel bad about what you're doing. They make you feel bad like you haven't hustled enough, you haven't worked hard enough. During the pandemic, people started saying stuff like, well, since you're in quarantine, you have lots of free time, right? If you haven't learned Chinese in this time, if you didn't go and learn a new programming language, if you didn't do this, then what were you even doing with all of that extra spare time? This is all part of hustle culture, and I think it's a little bit unhealthy. I think we can be well-rounded human beings that feel like we belong in tech and we belong in the communities that we are in without having to have this guy on Twitter yelling at us all the time. So I tend to go for role models that are a little bit different than this gentleman. I think about this magazine that I read in March of 1984, where this young lady has got her pigtails and her glasses and her bubble gum, and she is programming on a TI-99, now almost, 30 years ago. That's the tech community that I grew up in, and that's the community that I want other people to grow up in. I want my kids to feel like, oh, I could see myself in technology. There's a popular quote out there that says, diversity is being invited to the being asked to dance. That's an okay quote. It's not the best quote. The one that I like, which is even cooler, is inclusion is being a member of the party planning committee. Like when you think about, let's make a seat at the table for new people. Well, but let's talk about who built the table, and maybe we need to make a new table or a different shaped table or a larger table. We want to be as inclusive as we can, because when we think about inclusion, which I think is an even more word than diversity, inclusion is just simply the opposite of exclusion, right? If you have only stairs into your building, then you don't have a ramp. You're consciously excluding someone who might need to roll in a wheelchair up that ramp. Anything that we can do to make people feel welcome and included is good, even if it's small things. Now, I'm an old straight white guy, but I do have a disability in the form of type 1 diabetes. I have a bunch of medical implants, and I have insulin pumps and systems that keep me alive. And I was thinking about that 100 years ago. I wanted to know what would happen 100 years ago. 100 years ago, what would happen to me as a type 1 diabetic? And I did a lot of research in this, and it turns out 100 years ago, I'd be dead. And if you start thinking about all the different things, whether it be the flu or things before penicillin and things, a lot of us would be dead. If you have asthma or a bunch of different things, you would be dead. So that visibility is important to me. So when people see me on stage with my equipment, or I even made an Xbox avatar where I have my glucose implants on it, I've had parents of young diabetic kids come up afterwards and say, wow, we're really struggling with my kid's blood sugar and his diabetes. I was worried they wouldn't be able to have like a job like that where they could give a talk or travel internationally. And then when I saw you, I realized that they were going to be okay. Again, a small thing compared to other people's challenges, but it's a challenge that mattered to enough people that being a visible diabetic mattered, which is important because if you are of an underrepresented or an underestimated, I think is even better word, category, being visible is great because it means that you've paved the way for the next person. And this is super important because we find ourselves in technology where there's this priesthood. And this is just an analogy, no disrespect to any religion, but 1,000 years ago, if you wanted to learn about a religion, you don't go and get the book because you don't know how to read. You have to go to the priest, and the priest has the book. And you say, I want to learn all about the word. I know you have this great book. Can I see the book? And the priest says, don't touch it, just look. I will read the book to you, because they know how to read, they know how to provide the information. And then the relationship isn't one of peers learning. It's one of, I have the information. And this is a lot like learning regular expressions or the Linux command line, right? Don't touch. I shall teach you how to use sed and awk and grep at the command line. And then suddenly the relationship is computers are hard, computers are scary. And to this quote here, experts in a field rarely want people to understand what they do. That was written in 1974, but doesn't that look like a tweet that you could see in 2023? That's a 50-year-old tweet right there that Ted Nelson's Computer Lab put out in 1974. That is the opposite of what we want to do. We want knowledge to be available and free, and we want conferences and communities like this to thrive. And the opposite of what we want to do is what's called gatekeeping. Gatekeeping is literally standing at the gate and controlling information flow in and out of a social system. And people just do this based on their biases. And it's important to kind of explore one's personal bias. I found that my biggest bias is I'm ageist. Because the older I get, the more I get frustrated with young people because they don't know anything. Because you can't trust anyone under 30, if you didn't hear. And but then when I know that about myself and I know my bias, I'm like, well, wait a second, how else am I going to learn YAML and Kubernetes if I don't talk to someone under 30? And they have things that they can teach me. So I want to talk a little bit about ageism as well as we move through this talk, because what I'm trying to do is, to the best of my ability, share this positive energy. We don't want to have gatekeepers controlling the flow. We want all of us, everyone in the audience, all of our speakers, all of our organizers, to put out good work, do it in an efficient way. Don't waste your keystrokes. We'll talk about that. Share our experiences, share our stories in a way that make people feel excited and welcomed to join our community. And if you are kind and patient like that for years, then that energy will come back to you. That karma is real. I really, really believe in karma in that context. So then if we go back to the idea of hustle culture, we can recognize that this is not a healthy way to do things. To go and tell someone the way that you're successful is to do this, right? I think be kind might be a thing that you should be focusing on more than waking up and kicking ass. And then, of course, recognizing, as we said before, that as COVID, is it over, is it not over? Some people are remote, some people are not. Working from home can be a little bit stressful. Even right now, I would much rather be with you on stage because it would give me more energy. I'm alone in my room right now, which is why it's so wonderful that they put a camera on you all. I can see you. So often I'll do a remote talk and they will, thank you. So often I'll do a remote talk and then everyone will just turn their cameras off. And then I'm just a strange man talking to myself in my room, which is a very different experience than what I get to see here, which is this wonderful stage and space that people have set up. When people are working like this and they're working remotely, they feel often the pressure to overwork. They feel very stressed out. And I've been noticing myself lately doing a lot of doom scrolling. Are you familiar with doom scrolling? Right? This is where you just like, I don't, maybe the internet will make me feel better. The internet will never make you feel better. Like if your day sucked, unless it's only cat pictures, if you're just scrolling, you're going to be scrolling for doom. You're just looking for reasons to feel bad about everything in the world that sucks, and you will only feel bad. What I try to do as I move my way around the internet, whether it be communities or Reddit or Twitter, is to try to be as deliberate and present and focused as I can be. And that intentionality is super important in the way that we design our communities, the way that we live our lives, the way that we interact with other people. I want to talk a little bit about this word deliberate and intentional. There was a lovely gentleman that some of you may remember on the internet named Abel Wang, and Abel passed away a little while back from cancer, and he was actually in the Build keynote with me where he came directly from chemotherapy to Build. And he had this shirt on that you can buy. It says Abel Wang. He was a rock star, and he would go like this all the time and play his guitar. And it has his fingers, his rock star fingers, and the shirt says, "Don't accept the defaults." And that always makes me think about installing things in Windows. And it's always the installer that you don't read the fine print on that like installs toolbars and destroys your computer. Because what happens is you run the installer and you go, next, 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 finish. And then you go, oh my goodness, what did I just install? Did I install McAfee? No, I installed McAfee. And then you know your computer is ruined, right? You gotta press custom. And then you gotta turn off the stuff you don't want and turn on the things that you do want. Don't accept the default. And Abel was very intentional and very focused about his life. And that means every once in a while you just gotta stop and go, what am I doing? And that might be on an hour-by-hour basis. Like I got really stressed out yesterday because I'm working on Microsoft Build planning, and I needed to actually set up a meeting with myself. And I sat down, and I got my paper, and I wrote down all the things that were stressing me out, and I said, all right, what am I doing? I centered, went for a walk, and I came back. The opposite of that would have been to go to the next meeting and heads down and grind, and I probably would have gotten sick at the end of the day. So that intentionality, that being present, you can call it meditation. It can just be a moment to wake up for a second and be there is really important. And that intentionality can then move into your projects and into your communities. The other thing that I've been doing is focusing on my personal space and making a nest. I call it making a nest. You know, when the baby birds are coming, the birds make a nest and they make a space for themselves. Putting together an area in your home, in your work, wherever you like to spend most of your time, that gives you an opportunity to nest. This room behind me that we were joking about earlier when we were changing the LEDs, call it the $1 million room because they think it looks like a lot of money. They think that this is a room that represents money. What they don't realize is that these are IKEA shelves. That's a $50 light. This arcade cost $50 and I got it at a bar and I painted it black. And this couch I got at a thrift shop, and this is actually a slip cover. This is about a $300 room. And if you turn off the LEDs, it just looks like a spare bedroom, but I intentionally painted the walls a chocolate brown. And that's a $100 LED that I mounted on the wall. But hey, you mount a TV on the wall, it looks like $1 million. And the reason that I say that is that I wanted a space to do my job that felt different from my house. Because my house looks like one thing, and work, where I have worked remotely now for 15 years, looks like something else. So I intentionally painted it different carpet, different colors, different everything. And if I want the room to feel different, I make it feel different because I want it to feed my spirit. And that intentionality is the difference between just showing up and accepting the defaults or pressing custom and in this case, putting a little bit of effort into it and putting the things on my desk that make me happy and make me feel like I'm going to be able to succeed. And in doing that, I can ask myself, you know, is this the time to create? Is this the time to code? Is this the time to do something? And then when I do that, I'll get imposter syndrome. And then I feel like, oh my goodness, I don't know anything. How am I going to be a member of this community? I don't have anything to blog about. I don't have anything to YouTube about. You know, I have to speak at a conference and I don't have anything to talk about at that conference. Some of you might feel like that, like you want to get more involved, you want to write stuff, but everyone's already written the 101 tutorial. And then I remember that everyone is an expert at something. Everyone here is an expert in their own experience, in where they came from, in how they came up, what schools you went to, what schools you didn't go to. I went to what's called a community college, which is a very small trade school. I didn't go to a traditional university, and it took me 11 years to get my 4-year degree. But those are things you don't know by looking at me, just like I don't know how you got here and how you got to this community and what your journey is. So those are things that you can write about because there's no one in the world who is an expert at that and your journey and how you got here except you. So then the question is, if someone maybe in the audience afterwards comes up and has a question and they're like, hey Scott, that was a great talk, a lot of clip art, good job with the fonts, I have a question, and they email me a question. You all are very lovely people, but I don't know a lot of you. So if one of you sends me an email, I'm like, I mean, that you just gave me a to-do. Like, we don't know each other, and suddenly you're asking me to give you, like, the gift of my keystrokes. Because it's a question, and then let's say I write for like 20 minutes, and I write an amazing response. And then you're like, thanks. Where do those keystrokes go? Is anyone ever going to see them again? So I really think about conserving my keystrokes, because I only have so many, right? I have a finite number of keystrokes left in my hands before I die. That's kind of a dark way to look at it, but I can literally, I made a website for this, by the way. If you go to keysleft.com, I'll just put in, I'm looking at a person in the front row, I'll say that person is 29, and they type 80 words a minute. The person in the front row now has 281 million keystrokes left before they die, and the number is going down. Still going down because they're not typing right now. You should probably be typing. That means you have 562 computer programs or 93 novels or 1.5 million emails to your boss. So then the question is, do you want to spend your time writing emails to your boss or love letters or maybe tweets, because everyone knows that you can change someone's opinion if you write a tweet? Not. The reason that I point that out is if you recognize that you have a finite number of keystrokes left in your hands before you die, and then one of you emails me a question, now I have an interesting conundrum where you just gave me a gift. The question from a new person in the community, or the question from a peer in the community that you didn't think about, a question that I didn't know. It's like, what a great question. That's a gift. However, only got so many keystrokes. So what's the balance? I don't email you back the answer. I write a blog post, and then I send you a link to that. I put it in a knowledge base. I put it in the CMS. I put it in anywhere with a URL, and then I send a link to that. And then I go to sleep. And what's cool about that is that all it takes is for one forward. You forwarded it to, oh, look, Hanselman sent me a note. Forward. Now 2 people have read it. Or I put it on the blog, and then I go to bed, and then it got Google's indexed, and now 10 people have read it. So now my keystrokes have multiplied. And that's really significant. I'm spending my time and my keystrokes putting them in places with URLs rather than just email. So email is where keystrokes go to die. So I would encourage you to think about that. So when I go here to my blog, and I took a little bit of a break last year, but this is my blog over the last 20 years. I'm just going to scroll while I'm talking. So these are all either just my thoughts, but questions. A lot of these are times when someone sent me a note and asked a question, and I didn't email them the answer. I said, whoa, what a great freaking question. I'm going to write that down. I'm still going, by the way. I'm going to write that down, and I'm going to send you a link to that thing. So if you do that, my friends, I want everyone in the audience, I'm still scrolling, I'm going to scroll faster. I want everyone in the audience to stop answering email, and instead I want you to send links to your blog posts and talk about stuff. Do that for 20 years, and you will be a mid-level blogger like me that no one has ever heard of. I'm going to stop scrolling because my finger hurts. The other thing is, if you don't like typing, maybe make a podcast. You've seen this joke before. So now I'm scrolling. I've done over almost 900 episodes of the podcast over 17 years. Here's a little life hack for you. A lot of time people will email me and they'll say, hey, Scott, can I pick your brain? No, I don't want my brain picked. Hey, can I buy you coffee? I have enough money for coffee. But when I do that, when I call someone and I say, hey, can I pick your brain? They do the same thing. So here's the life, by the way, that was only 400 shows. Here's the life hack. If someone says, can you come on my podcast? It's the same thing. It's the same thing, you guys, as picking their brain, except you get to record it. You get to meet people that you have no business talking to, and then you get to put it on the internet, go to sleep, and then if more than one person listens to it, you've just made a success. I talked to someone last week. This lady here is a PhD computational astrophysicist. I have no business talking to anyone like, I had to go and read all of her PhD papers and try not to ask dumb questions. But it was freaking amazing. If I had said, can I pick your brain or buy you coffee, she would have put me in spam. But now that is out there. I got to talk to all these cool people. So the reason that I'm telling you this is I want you to think about how you can share this information, whether you're an amateur like me, and I don't know anything about astrophysics, remembering that there are no professionals. How can I collect information and share it with the community in a scalable way? I was showing you all of that stuff, all those blog posts and podcasts, not to make you feel bad, not to make you go, oh, I don't have time. I got a wife and 2 kids. All I'm doing with where am I getting that time from is I'm not having coffee with people. I'm doing podcasts, and I am not doing emails. Every time anyone writes me an email, I put it somewhere public if I can. So I don't have any more time than anyone else. It's just a very intentional, deliberate way of thinking about content creation. And it's not making me any money. It's not like the podcast is like it's walking, or it's taco money. It's walking around money. I have a couple of sponsors, but it's fun. And now I can look at that corpus of information and share it. And then when AI came out, I went and ran a transcript. So now I have searchable transcripts on 900 episodes of the podcast, over 450 hours of content that I can search now by text. So think about collecting your URLs, collecting your websites, and putting them into one place. Now, a lot of people will say, hey, I've got 20 years experience, and they'll make you feel bad about your number of years. I don't know the average number of years of people in the audience. We probably have some people who are maybe a year or two into tech, maybe people who are in 20 plus years, maybe people just joined and this is their first conference, and maybe people have been coming to conferences like this and user groups for years. I don't like it when people use their experience to like bonk you on the head and make you feel bad. At companies that I've worked at in the past, I've seen people say, well, hey, I've got 20 years experience, you know, I've been here 20 years, you should listen to me. But then the question becomes, do they have 20 years experience, or is it the same year 20 times? Is it the same job at the same company doing the same thing? You want to have not just diversity in your teams, but diversity in your own brain. Are you working on different stuff? Are you awake and present and intentional about what you're trying to do? I have been in tech now for 31 years for money. I'm not counting like when I was 10 on a computer. I'm talking about in the marketplace, you know, working. So 31 years. But if I'm honest with myself, I was probably asleep for maybe 7 of them. Not 7 in a row, but just in that kind of like losing time, wasn't really being there thinking about, you know, am I improving my skills and things like that. So I try to kind of wake up. And I don't mean wake up in the woke way. I'm talking about wake up like literally like, you know, when you're driving a car and you just kind of, whoa, I'm driving. Just little micro moments. You didn't fall asleep, but you were on autopilot and you lost a block or two. Or you fall asleep on the train and you're like, whoa, where am I? Happen at work too. If work is not satisfying or feeding your spirit, you can go and say, what am I doing with my career? Let me think about that. Or, gosh, I haven't learned anything new this month. What can I do to get better, to learn something new? Those are opportunities for you to wake up and then ask yourself, when you look at your experience, do I have 10, 15, 20 years experience? Or maybe I slept through a year of that. And then what do I do about that? Do I try to you know, redouble my efforts? Do I try to be more intentional? Or am I okay with it? I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying be aware, be conscious, be intentional about it. During the last 4 or 5 years, my family and I went and we got our black belt, our first dan black belt in Taekwondo, and we coordinated over many years to get it as a family. So we all got our first dan black belt in Taekwondo at the same time. And I thought this was an amazing accomplishment. And I was like, oh my gosh, you know, black belt, don't mess with me, I'm a black belt. But I'm a first dan, if there's any martial artists in the room, which is like a baby black belt. And the gentleman that gave us our black belts was a 9th dan who'd been doing it like since 1962. So just when we thought we had arrived at the destination, yay, black belts, after like 5 years of busting our butts, he says, now the work starts. Like, now the work starts. Yeah, now we can actually do something. Like literally that was all just prep. The black belt is like step 1, step 0. And I was like, oh my God, I thought we accomplished something. And he's like, no, you did, but it never is going to stop, right? It's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And that really changed my reframing. 5 years, 10 years, 15 years experience. You don't want community. That's the end point. That's the moment where you stop. I see myself making a little bit of stuttering. Is the audio at least clear? Can you give me a thumbs up? Is the audio cool? It's just that the video stops? All right, thanks, friends. So when I think about other black belts, I think about Tim Berners-Lee. Do you know who Tim Berners-Lee is? He invented the World Wide Web, right? I think it's really cool because I see a lot of young people right now that want to be a senior web developer. I just want to point out that the inventor of the web is not yet a senior web developer. He just said web developer. And I think that's really cool of him because if you think about like who this guy is and what he accomplished, he could, if he wanted to, like imagine what a flex it would be if he showed up for an interview and he just put the. You know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, you're a web developer? You senior? No, I'm the web developer. That was me. I made that. Oh, well, you got the job, Tim. Good job. Enjoy. Come into the company. he doesn't understand all of the web, and he made the thing. So that sense of humbleness, I think, is really important because, like I mentioned before about my bias and my ageism, I am learning a lot from young people, from early in career people, because there's an opportunity to get fresh ideas and fresh perspectives. So for a while, I was out there trying to mentor people. I thought mentorship was a thing I wanted to focus on. But instead, I realized that I could use I could be mentored, right? I'm not too old to get good advice. So a little bit of homework for folks in the audience. If you are a senior or later in career person, maybe go and find a mentor, a mentor who's younger than you, and then go, if you have a lot of experience, go and mentor some people. And then if you're younger and you know something, pair up, find a peer mentor, someone who can lift you up and teach you fresh things. Because what I was doing when I was mentoring, I was doing it wrong. Because I'm like, hey, I'm old and I know things. I'll mentor you. And then I would get together with a young person once a week, and I would give them a weekly lecture from an old man. And welcome to the mentorship. And then they would go, oh, that was good. And it was very kind of big dad energy. And that's not what people need. This is important for all of our big dads to understand. Big dad energy is great, but if your mentorship relationship is like this again, here I am old, you shall listen to me. Oh, thank you for the wisdom, old man. People are over-mentored. Women, people of color have lots of mentorship. They have enough mentorship. They are what's called over-mentored. Instead, we want to think about new ways to lift people up, new early in career people. Mentorship's fine, but the definition of mentorship is different than the definition of sponsorship. Mentors can sit with you. They can help you define a dream. They can help you think about your strengths and stuff like that. That's fine. You can bring that energy. But if you want to really make new spaces for new, cool people, sponsorship means being a spotlight, making luck for people by lifting them up into new spaces. I am very blessed to be invited to give talks, and sometimes I will be invited to give a talk, and I'll go, maybe I'm not the person for that talk. You should try this new up-and-comer. Or maybe I'll bring the new up-and-comer with me, and then I'll slowly fade away. And then now that new up-and-comer has an opportunity. And this is really a significant concept because a lot of people feel a little defensive when you say that their career was not built on hard work. My career was very largely built on luck. Now, am I here getting talked to you people because of luck? Absolutely. Does that mean I didn't work hard? Two things can be true at the same time. So what we need to do now is dissect luck. What is luck? What am I saying when I say luck, and how I can make luck, how I can create luck, and how luck exists for other people. So there's a formula for luck, and the formula is, click, 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 come on, whee. Luck is opportunity plus being prepared. So the being prepared part, that's the hard work. And everybody has a story about or an opportunity where perhaps they met someone, like I met someone on a bus, and I was just chatting with that person, and I was prepared because I had been studying computer science. They gave me their business card, and then I got an interview. If I had not been prepared, that would have been a nothing interaction. I never would have gotten the business card. If that person hadn't given me the business card, that wouldn't have happened. You have to have opportunity, and you have to be prepared when the opportunity happens. So here's the thing. Because of where I grew up and because of my background, I had lots of opportunities. I was often in places where opportunity would happen. There's lots of people out there who are prepared, and they're looking around and they're missing opportunity because no one's making it happen. So here's what I discovered. And I know that there's a lot of talk right now about this term privilege. And some people have an allergic reaction to it because they think it doesn't exist. But a privilege would be like, being a member of a club or being at a user group or being at a conference. Like someone who's not at this conference is going to miss an opportunity. Some coworker who couldn't make it today is not going to meet someone cool. Someone at this conference probably needs a job and is going to talk to someone who's going to say, oh gosh, I needed that opportunity. I wanted to speak at a conference too, and they're going to have an opportunity, and being prepared and being at this conference is going to mean that they're going to, get to do something that they wouldn't have done if they hadn't made it, or if they hadn't gotten sick. So I realized that privilege isn't just about race and gender and age. It's also about level and where you are in your career. Because I've been doing this so long, I can create opportunity. I can retweet a small business. I can have a new person on my podcast. And in doing that, I'm being not a mentor to them, but being a sponsor, and I'm putting a spotlight on that person. And I've had multiple, hundreds of situations and examples I could give you, where someone who had a small business or an open source project, and by me using my my megaphone to point people at that thing, and they'll say, you kickstarted my business, and I was able to quit my job, and now I'm doing this full time. Or that was the retweet that I needed so that I could get on a LinkedIn, and I met with these people, and I moved across the country, and now I work at a new company. What can we do? What can we do in the audience here with our privilege, whatever your privilege is, whether it be the company you work at, the people that you know, the fact that you've been around a long time? We all have our different privileges to go and create luck for the next generation. We can help them be prepared by mentoring them, by teaching them, by being a teacher, by giving talks. We can use our network, add them to our LinkedIn, and by that, create luck for new people. And we have an unlimited amount we can make, which is super cool. So then if we think about what does it mean to be a sponsor, let's look at options. You can mentor. You can strategize with an early in career person or a new person. You can help them connect to other people because you have a network. A lot of people here in the audience know a lot of people. Love that's the best, easiest thing you can do is you say, oh, Anna was talking about a cool plugin that she made. You should talk to Jeff. Anna, Jeff, I'm going to introduce you to. And then I'll step back, and now I've gone and created some luck, and then they're going to talk, and it's going to be a thing. You can give opportunities. Hey, why don't you come speak at our conference? Another example of opportunity giving would be at work. I'm a manager of like 19 people, but should I be giving all of the presentations about what the team worked on? If there's an opportunity that comes up where maybe a vice president wants an update, if I'm always the one giving the talk, then that's kind of lame because I have all these cool people who work for me. Maybe I'll have one of them do it. And then that's, again, an opportunity. Like, hey, why don't you go and give the presentation on, and the vice president will see you. You want to advocate for your friends, for your coworkers, for your community, and for your people. And then when you start these relationships, whether it be weekly or monthly or whatever, you can recognize that it's not necessarily forever. You don't have to be stressed out about being a mentor for an unlimited amount of time. You can mentor in phases. Think about what's their career phase, what's your career phase. Try to make mentorship a two-way street and not like a regularly scheduled lecture from an old person, because that's how I was doing that, and I was doing it wrong, and I felt bad once I realized it. And then I changed, and I started asking people what they wanted from the mentorship experience. So I'm going to pause. I'm going to be intentional and breathe for a second. I'm hoping that this is not boring. I'm going to take a moment then and tell a couple of silly stories as we get towards the end, and maybe our friends in the chat can remind me how much time I have, because I don't want to talk too long. So I've lost my timer here. I think I have about 10 minutes more. No one knows. Yes, thumbs up for the 10 minutes more. Okay, cool. So one of the most fun things about being an old man in tech is that I've got lots of dumb stories. So I love reminding people that you also have dumb stories, and you should tell them because they humanize the experience. And I want everyone here to be thinking about what are the times that you dumped the database in production, or those things for people that we're human. Many years ago, my dad gave me a Swiss Army knife, and I'm a big fan of the Swiss Army knife, and I joke that the Swiss Army knife is the reason that the Swiss Army is the power they are today. It's this kind of ridiculous device that has basically bad versions of everything. Like, it's just a bad pair of scissors, and it's just a very mediocre screwdriver. It's just a bunch of little average things, but it's very versatile. I think of myself as being a Swiss Army knife programmer, where I'm kind of mediocre at everything, but I can do a lot of different stuff. And that's a decision that I made to try to be broad in my understanding of technology. But I feel like I did not skimp on the basics. So I do have at least I'm a good knife. You know what I mean? You got to focus on at least the basics, the basic understandings. And some of the stories that I like to think about are in these categories. I think about problem solving, think about layering in software, composing systems together from their pieces, and then recognizing patterns. So problem solving is super fun. And problem solving really is a great example of where an early in career person and a senior person can get together and understand their differences. I like to say that problem solving is asking yes/no questions at scale. And you know, when you've had a problem and you're looking at the tech and then for days, and then a senior person will come over and they'll go, is it that? And it's like, how do you know that? How could you possibly have known that in 2 seconds? And I've been looking at this for days. And the trick is because they're still here, because they've been in tech all this time, and they didn't get chased out, they didn't quit, they didn't give up. So we want the earlier in career people to make it 10, 20, 30 years in, so that they too can do problem solving. So here's my problem solving story. I was presenting to a bunch of 14-year-olds, and I said, all right, kids, let's learn how to program. We're going to learn how computers work. My toaster is broken. I would like some toast. And then I paused and made it really awkward, because one of the privileges of being a dad is being able to make things as awkward as possible, as often as possible. So I just kind of paused. I said, we're going to learn how to program, but until we program, I need some toast. How are we going to solve this? Well, you know, simple thinking around toast would be what my kids yelled out, which is like, buy a new toaster. I mean, okay, I guess that would be a solution, right? My laptop is broken, buy a new laptop. That's fairly environmentally unsound and generally destructive. But let's think about the system in which the toaster exists, right? This is a toaster. I would like some toast. Here's my toaster. What's the right way to do it? I was presenting to these 14-year-old middle schoolers, and I said, we need to debug this problem. This is a debugging issue. And one of them says, well, is the power on? Okay, that's cool. Think about that. It's a very simple thing. We're all thinking maybe the power's not on, but I want hot bread. And they're already thinking about, well, you need power, you need electricity in order to get that bread. So then how can I debug this? Well, maybe I could plug in something else. Plug in a lamp, see if the lamp turns on. Okay, the lamp doesn't turn on. All right, did I blow a fuse? All right, someone else says, let's look around the room. Is the power on at all? This is now an electrical problem that has nothing to do with hot bread, but it does have to do with the way that we think about how this toaster exists in the larger system. And then, of course, because they're kids and they're creative, one of them says, I'm going to look outside to see if the neighbors have power. How cool is that? That's a programmer. This is a 14-year-old who doesn't know how to code, and they're looking out the window at the street lights in the neighbors' houses because I don't have hot bread. That's the kind of ridiculous debugging, right, where it's DNS. Whatever it is, it's going to be DNS. That's the problem. It's always DNS. And then, of course, they decided that maybe aliens had attacked pulse, that it knocked out the power globally, and that's why I couldn't have toast, right? The difference between an early in career and a later in career person is that an early in career person will just Google a lot, and a later in career person can ask a question and eliminate an entire class of problems. It's those yes/no questions at scale. So I went and I made a list of all the things that could be wrong with my web app. This is just off the top of my head. I just wrote down a whole list of things. SSL certs and ports and firewalls, This isn't a list that I'm supposed to ask an early in career person to memorize. This isn't a list you learn in school. How do we get that list? And I'm sure there's another 50 ways that a website could be down. How do you do that? You do that by being given the opportunity to do that. You have to fail. You have to be given the safe space at your company or where you can fail at scale. Does that make sense? If I go to a company and I've only been there for a year, I'm fresh at the company, and they're going to make me feel like my job is on the line if I don't know how to do something, then I'm not going to feel like psychologically safe, and I'm going to like freak out and probably quit tech. But if they're like, yeah, we have a staging site, go figure out why the site is down, they will develop this list of things. And as our great famous American President Abraham Lincoln said on the internet, it's always DNS. I also want to point out this one here that I snuck in. I don't know if anyone saw this. Sometimes on Sherlock Holmes, there is a situation where like, the young bride killed her husband, but she has an alibi. She was on the other side of town when she killed him, so it can't be her. And then what'll happen is Watson will be like, Holmes, it could have been twins. And he says, no, it's never twins, right? Knowing those things, knowing that maybe it isn't DNS is also super important because it's never twins. Problem solving is a skill that is only learned when we are given the opportunity to fail at scale. And then once we are able to solve those problems, we can start digging deeper and deeper and deeper, lower levels and lower layers into our system. And layering is one of the most interesting parts about computer science, is that layering is vertical. Layering is hiding the complexity of the system from itself and from yourself. And layering is actually lying. Layering is just lying to yourself. If you have an abstraction layer or an API on top of something, it's just a big lie. And this is really interesting to me because some of the most interesting lies that we have out there are systems that you are already familiar with. So, for example, this is an email, and we all send emails. But a lot of people, unless you've personally worked on making an email protocol from scratch, which very few people have done, have never seen what an email looks like. This is behind the scenes of an email. This is the actual text of an email. Here's the plain text, here's the HTML, here's the multi-part MIME content type barrier boundary, here's the boundary definition. And notice up here, it's basically just name value pairs. One of the most interesting things I realized about computers and computer science in the last 20 years is that it doesn't matter if it's YAML or XML or if it's JSON. It's all just name value pairs. That's all it is. So why am I showing you what email looks like? Well, here's what an HTML form looks like when it's been posted over HTTP. Here's email. Here's a form post. It's all just name value pairs. I would not have guessed, and maybe hopefully you wouldn't have guessed, that email and form post, they're not the same, but they're all based on the same Lego bricks, the same pieces. It's very likely that when you are learning one technology, that there's another technology that's already out there that's like it, because all ideas grow out of other ideas. You probably know these things. A great example that I like that will date me is this here. On the left, we have a hard drive, which is just spinning circles with a head that seeks, and the data is stored in arcs on the circles. And over here, we have a spinning circle where the data is stored in arcs on the circle. This is a record player, if everyone remembers that. That's the same tech. Blu-ray, DVD, it's all the same. It's all the wheel, everybody. It's so important to remember those things, to look back and realize that it's all built on these basic principles. And then from that, we can go and compose really interesting systems with these layers. Now, there's a really cool TV show on Netflix called Altered Carbon. And in Altered Carbon, there's this guy who gets beamed into other people's bodies. Basically, he wears a skin. So like if you want to transport yourself from Mars, you don't actually physically move your body to Mars. They just beam your brain there and put you in a different body. And what's cool about that is on the show, each season he's played by a different actor. It's the same guy, just a different actor. And then his buddy, his friend, is this guy here who's an actor named Chris Connor, and he plays an AI. So his best friend is an AI, and the AI lives inside of a hotel, and he is basically Edgar Allan Poe, the poet. And the hotel is called the Raven. So Chris Connor here is playing Edgar Allan Poe as an AI in the hotel called the Raven. This is season 2, and Anthony Mackie, who's Captain America, is the main character, and Chris Connor, Edgar Allan Poe, is there. Now, Chris Connor is not well known. Anthony Mackie is well known, but I really like to tweet kind of like mid-level actors whenever I see them in a show, and just be like, hey, I saw you in that show, and you were great. Because they're working actors, and I think that's really cool to just give people props when you see somebody. So I go and I tweet Chris Connor, and I say, you're awesome, you did a great job on that show. I really enjoyed Altered Carbon. And he tweeted me back, and we start going back and forth, and I look at his location, and I see he's in Portland. I'm in Portland. Here's the thing, friends, you got to shoot your shot. So I said, hey, can I pick your brain? Do you want to have coffee? Of course, he said no. No, I said, dude, do you want to come on my podcast? Came on my podcast. And this is how you know he's an actor and I'm not an actor. He has like an ascot or like some kind of a scarf, like a European. This is how Americans disguise ourselves as Europeans, when we just wear a scarf and like a nice pair of shoes. Otherwise, you can spot us a mile away. Super nice guy. So we go and we do a podcast. He's amazing. I'm having this like burgeoning bromance with this guy. I'm like, this is going to be great. We're going to be best friends. And I take the SD card from the recorder home, and I plug the SD card into my computer, and this is what I saw. What I ended up with was an infinitely recursing series of empty folders. And I thought I was going to die. Like, think about this. I'm befriending this cool person who I admire on television. I spend an hour of his time recording a podcast. I'm like, we're going to be best friends. And I go home and I have an empty SD card. Do I block his number? Do I move? Do I move to another city? Right? Like, how do I get out of this? Do I call him and say, hey, remember that lightning in a bottle that we did? Can we capture that lightning again? Just say everything exactly the same way you did before. You're an actor. It'll be fine. This was awful. So I realized that my only solution was to quit my job and spend the next 18 days trying to figure out how to get the data off of this SD card. So I looked at the SD card and I could see that there was about 300 megabytes of data there, but the thing thought it was empty. So maybe I need to go and run check disk, but the thing is clearly corrupted and it's not going to rebuild. I have a corrupted SD card, but I know that the bytes must have been put down on paper. So I started digging and I started learning about FAT, the file allocation table. Now, I don't know anything about this stuff. This is important. I am not a low-level programmer. I'm a web person. This is like when you have your car that you're driving and then you it breaks down and you don't know anything about cars, but you just like open the bonnet, you open the hood, and you kind of look at it. And you're gonna like there's anything that you could possibly. You're just looking for tubes that aren't plugged in, right? Like that looks like a tube. Maybe that tube's not plugged in. So I'm doing this except on computers. But I know how to deal with layers of abstraction. So I got deeper and deeper and deeper, and I started reading the specs and realizing that I have a corrupted file allocation table, and I use a hex editor, and over a period of 18 hours, I rebuild the podcast, find the files, and I'm still friends with this guy, and we have tacos every couple of weeks. Why? Not because I'm smart, not because I'm clever, because I recognize that nothing in the computer is hidden from me, and even though I work up here, I recognize that there's stuff underneath, right? Even though I drive an automatic shift car, I recognize that there is a such thing as a stick shift, a manual shift car. And now that I've done that, debugging, I can recognize that there are patterns, because pattern recognition is the power that later in career technologists have. It's literally just, how do you know that? I've seen it before. So how do we get young people there? The way that you get early in career people to know that is to allow them to become later in career people so that they'll see that. One time I spent 13 hours debugging a segmentation fault on a Raspberry Pi. I had a file that would work and a file that wouldn't work, and I ended up putting one of them in a folder called good and one of them in a folder called bad, and I did a comparison inside of a hex editor, and I noticed that on the good one, this 0D was missing. Now, audience members, does anyone know why that? Raise your hand if you know why. I spent hours, 13 hours on this, but someone in the audience is going to know, I know why, I know exactly why. And the only way that they could know that is because they're super, super old. Okay, what is 0D, my friends? Anyone want to take a guess? No? Anyone yelling anything out? Let's find out. Turns out that 0D is carriage return. And I was treating a binary file as a text file. So when I copied the file over, it was stripping out the carriage return. I told this to a 22-year-old at work, and they said, that's amazing. I didn't know that. How did you know that? What's a carriage? And where is it returning to? So this is where I said, well, and this is an important tip for everyone. This is a mansplaining moment, because I was made for this. What's a carriage, and why is it returning? I can grab my Lego typewriter. This is the moment. This is the moment, my friends. You have to ask, would you like to know? If they say no, then you don't get to mansplain that day. You have to put the thing down and you just have to go and be alone. But if they say yes, you say, well, in 1875, and then you get to go and do a whole lecture on carriages and how the carriage carries the paper and it returns to the other side as you type, and you go click, 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 and then line feed, line feed, line feed. Very exciting. One of my favorite lectures, carriage return line feed, is 0D and 0A. The carriage carries the paper, the line feed. So I did a whole thing on carriage return line feed. And what was so cool about that is you get to talk about how 100 years of technology is now why your Git repository is corrupted. I just think that's so freaking cool, right? Like, why do I have to set auto CRLF? Would you like to know? Let's talk about ASCII. Let's talk about teletypes, and let's talk about 100-year-old typewriters, and let's talk about Lego. I think that's the best. And then you get to tell those stories, and that's one of my favorite stories, and I want to know what your favorite stories are. I know that I've gone over and spent a lot of time talking. I want to thank everyone for putting up with me today, and I think if we do have time, I think there was an opportunity for some Q&A, but either way, thanks for letting me do this.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I would like to say thank you. I think it was a perfect speech, especially for a community event. Is he done in a runner? No, you have to come back now. There we go. Are there any questions out there? We got time for questions? Go on, someone put the phone. Oh, he's just putting his phone up.
Sorry, my son is asking to come pick him up. I'm just telling him I'll be there in a little bit, unless he's already here. Sorry about that. Little boys.
Yeah. Well, if nobody has any questions, I would just like to say thank you very much, and it was a pleasure that you could attend. Round of applause.
Yay.